Welcome to Deborah Says Radio Show, Self-Empowerment Strategies. Deborah K. Adams, M.A., is an international #1 best-selling book author, expert on education and prevention of domestic violence and all forms of violence. Deborah says, I have lived it, I have studied it, and I have worked it. Deborah's consulting business, Self-Empowerment Strategies, SES, evolved out of working with thousands of survivors of domestic violence and other forms of violence over the past 2 decades. Experience, study and research, and practical application led to the development of the SES priorities and the 5 A's to authenticity. Experiencing violence is traumatic, and it reduces your innate ability to function at your highest level. Deborah and her guests will share their knowledge, skills, and strategies. Join them in living free of violence with joy and out loud. Here she is, Deborah K. Adams.
Hey, good evening, listeners. This is Deborah Adams. I'm so happy you've decided to join us because I hope you're still with us because we've had just a little bit of technical difficulty. But the truth is that this topic and this guest is so important, I wanted to keep trying because I want you to meet Maxine Brown, who is my guest tonight. She is a keynote speaker and a workshop facilitator on the topics of domestic violence and rebuilding your life after divorce. Her Her inspirational stories illustrate how to co-parent with a difficult ex and how to create healthier relationships. Maxine is one of the fabulous and amazing co-authors. We both worked on a #1 international best-selling book that came out in December. The name of that book is The Missing Piece, A Transformational Journey. And together we are working on kind of a sequel to that that's named The Missing Piece in Business, which will be available in March. Well, prior to that, Maxine authored her own book, and the name of that book is Years of Tears, and it is her story of her 10-year marriage to a controlling tyrant that changed her life forever. I would like to bring up Maxine. Maxine, are you there?
I sure am.
Hi, thank you for hanging in here with me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's truly my pleasure because I feel so connected to you after all the things we've been doing together and some of our shared life experiences. I am so excited to get the people to meet you and know of your work that I'm just going to start right into it, okay? Now I mentioned your book, the name of it, The Years of Tears. And tell us what motivated you to write that book.
My pattern was abusive relationships. I had one after another. And my first marriage failed, and it was a violent marriage. And my husband became a drug addict. And after I left that relationship, I stayed alone for about 5 years. I didn't date anyone because I just knew this is what I always did. I picked the same kind of guy with a different name. And so I didn't date at all. And then through my job, I met this fellow that I thought was going to be the answer to my prayers. He was a minister. Wow, now finally I was going to have my happy ending. And so we were married. It was the most destructive relationship I ever had. He gradually took control of my life, separated me from family, friends, and then from my own children. And I stayed for 10 years because in my faith, I believed that if there was no adultery, there can be no divorce. So I was committed to the relationship, and I was going to stay until death do us part. And it almost killed me. I had planned my suicide towards the end because I couldn't take it anymore. The relationship was so toxic. I left instead, rebuilt my life from nothing, and started all over again. And that journey was so life transforming that I had to write the book. Also, my children were destroyed. My 2 children that I came into that marriage, so much happened to them that it was for myself, for other families, and for the children that I had to write this book and make a contribution in this area to see if I can do something to set other families free.
Wow, that is an amazing life experience that you've just described. I certainly have empathy for what you went through, and I know that you mentioned you stayed 10 years. I know why we stay. I stayed for 17 years. So I definitely get that, and I know you thought you were doing the right thing, the best you could at that time, right, Maxine?
Yep, one day at a time, one decision at a time. Now I see things very differently, but at the time I was trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
I made a mess of things, but I really was trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that that's something that the general public doesn't understand about being involved in a violent relationship, that the amount of control that happens, and it happens really very quickly, sometimes to us, and sometimes it takes a long time. I know that my experience is not the same as yours, but I think that we would both have a deep empathy for each other, sharing a lot more detail than you just did. So, but really that's not so much the point of you publishing your book, Years of Tears. It kind of motivated you forward to, as you said, to contribute. So let's talk about how you've been contributing beyond the book.
Well, when I wrote the book, I had no idea what it took to write a book. And I self-published because I would not have been able to withstand the traditional publishing process, where you submit it and they say no.
Right.
You submit it and they say no over and over again. Because of the years of verbal abuse where I was told I was worthless and I was stupid and ignorant and who do you think you are and all the things that are said to you, I would have given up with the first no. And I knew that. So I thought, I'm not going to let anybody tell me no, and I'm publishing this book. So,
well, good for you.
Yeah, and I can be a little bit stubborn that way. So anyway, I just went for it, And then I thought, oh my, now you have to get it out there, and what would that take? And at the time I started, I didn't know I didn't use Facebook. I didn't know what Twitter was. I didn't know anything about anything. And I took it on one step at a time. But I was determined to have that voice of a survivor, be out there in the world and say, you're not alone. If you've gone through this, you're not alone. Be encouraged. You can make it. You're stronger than you think you are. All these kinds of things that I wish someone told me. I want to be that voice shouting those things out on Twitter, so that if someone sees it, they'll know. And I get interactions all the time from survivors and current victims, and they say, thank you, thank you, thank you. It happens all the time.
That's wonderful. I know, do you remember the first time you shared your story with the public in any way?
Yes, I used to work with the TANF population, people who apply for welfare. And I developed a workshop around the topic of domestic violence because I kept bumping into victims among my clients. And I wanted them to understand the dynamics of control. And so little by little, as I was teaching this workshop, I got more and more comfortable with sharing little pieces of my story here and there. Mm-hmm. And gradually I was able to tell even the ugliest, most painful pieces. but it was a process. It took me time to be able to get comfortable. The worst part is talking about the child abuse and what happened to my children in that marriage. And now I'm able to do that. So I've taught, I've shared my story at law school, where I've been able to talk about whatever's necessary that I think will be helpful to that particular audience.
Great. I think it's so important. But I remember being a little bit apprehensive about even naming myself a survivor or victim of domestic violence. Was that part of your process as well? Because I think I did not have the knowledge that that was my experience when I was going through it.
I as soon as I left, I talked about it all the time. I couldn't not talk about it.
Right.
But when I was going through it, I didn't see myself as a victim because he was not punching me. Mine was emotional and verbal abuse, psychological abuse, and extreme control. Every kind of control you can imagine. Like on the power and control wheel where all those different things are talked about, I had every single thing on the wheel. Mm-hmm. So that severe control, I don't know. I think that was, but since he wasn't hitting me, I didn't see myself as a victim of domestic violence.
Right. And nobody else witnessed well, I'm not going to say nobody else because probably people were aware of it eventually, but I mean, in my mind, it felt like nobody knew or saw what I really experienced and wouldn't believe me if I had talked about it anyway. And so I just thought I was in a really crummy, terrible, bad marriage. And that, but when I left, I did start getting education, and that is one of your main goals, it seems, from your biography and your writing of your book and the workshops that you deliver, is to tell all of the story of it, not just the physical violence. Is that right?
Yes, and I really believe if people understand what the warning signs are, they'll get out at the beginning. If I had had any idea I was dealing with a sociopath, that there was no hope for change, that it was a hopeless situation, I would have left in the first year because the signs were there. I just didn't know what the warning signs were. I'd never had a class on domestic violence. Right. I didn't know anything about it. And you know, these guys, when they come into your life, it feels romantic. All of your time, they're doting on you, and they just sweep you right off your feet. Well, I mean, who's going to complain about that? It didn't feel dangerous at the time, right?
Right.
And then jealous. I mean, he was jealous of everyone. He wanted to be with me. Well, I didn't. I mean, I'd been alone for a while, and it felt romantic. Yes. I wasn't afraid of that. It didn't seem bad.
Until years go by.
Yeah. And it was a gradual, taking over of any little piece of territory. I mean, everything to him, he just encroached on me and just backed me into this little tiny box. Right. But it didn't happen in one day.
No.
It was a gradual thing.
Yeah. That's one of the things I like to talk about too when I'm trying to educate people about the experience of living with someone who loves you and abuses you at the same time, because that's a contradiction, right? Is that there's this continuum of violence that starts on a lower end and will eventually escalate over time up to the more dangerous and more lethal types of violent behaviors. And it's hard for people that either didn't witness you experience it or have no idea themselves, but how that control Any verbal and emotional abuse can eventually escalate to where you are afraid for your life.
Yes. I was completely controlled, but I personally didn't think he was going to kill me. I knew that if I stayed any longer, I would have definitely killed myself. There's no doubt in my mind.
Right. So that's kind of, that makes you wonder, was that his original intent?
I have no idea, but I think I was just a tool for him to use to have his needs met, so he didn't see me as a person at all. I was not a person. Yeah.
Well, would you share some of your red flags that you want to make sure people know about to help them determine if they're in an abusive relation for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first one, I think, is that whirlwind romance, that's sweeping you off your feet. Again, that doesn't feel dangerous, but it is a first warning sign that they're sweeping you off your feet to grab the territory of your heart, so you stop using your brain. You stop questioning, what their motives are. You stop thinking or examining everything. He throws you off balance, right? Right. And it's usually a really fast romance. He wants right away for you to commit to an exclusive relationship. Almost feel pressure. That's a warning sign.
Yeah.
Love does not
what
pressure.
Kind of ways, as an example of that, would you share with our listeners?
Well, it could be that excessive jealousy, that they just want you to not talk to anyone but them, Mm-hmm. You're going to spend today, I thought today was our special day. Why do you want to go to have lunch with your friends? I thought we were going to be together. It sounds, I love you so much, I just can't stand it when I see you talking to other people. It sounds nice, but it's not nice. It's a way of controlling your time. Then he's going to begin to talk about, maybe you have a series of friends. He'll pick the wildest one and then start to talk about that friend. Well, I'm just looking out for you. If you hang around with so-and-so, they're going to talk about you the way they talk about her. See how she dresses? You don't want that, do you? I'm just looking out for you, baby. And so it sounds nice, and you may not see it as dangerous, but that's a red flag, because he's not going to stop with Linda. He's going to go on to Mary and Elizabeth, and he's just going to take them one at a time. Another thing,
they mask their control and concern for you.
Absolutely. So it may not seem dangerous, but anyone who starts to criticize your friends and family, that's a red flag. Mm-hmm. Because everyone should be able to have friends. Everyone should be able to have family. Okay. And for someone to try and get between you and your family or your friends, that's a red flag.
Oh, I agree. I think, so I think sometimes we're more vulnerable to people who operate on that kind of mode. And in my case, I was away from my support system. I was in another state attending school, and I didn't have the stability, right there within touch. But so, for instance, the father of my 4 children said to me, we met one night, and he said, I'm going to leave my car with you because I don't want to take it with me. He was in the Navy. If I take it with me and park it on the base, it's going to get damaged. He really, when I think back, I think, boy, was I gullible. But I was like, oh, yeah. So he left his most prized possession with me, made me responsible for that, which created this enormous trust bond immediately.
And you had just met him.
I had just met him.
See,
I
now,
didn't know him from Adam.
there you go. Now, there you go, Deborah. That seems
And then,
right.
how do you explain that to people when years later when it all began with this sort of scenario?
That's a perfect example. Someone I was interacting with on Twitter, they were saying too that, the words at the very beginning, you just meet this person. It's our destiny. Yes. We were meant to be together. You're the only one. It's just so over the top. Well, romance it's just, you have to be careful. So another red flag is as you're with this person, you begin to be uneasy. You just have a feeling that something bad might happen if you upset them. You don't want to upset them. So you start filtering yourself or being careful what you say. Mm-hmm. That's unhealthy. You should be able to say what you have to say, and if you disagree, you can say so, and it's okay. If you can't express an opinion, that's a red flag,
Well, I agree with that now.
Another thing, these guys, they want to have, they say, oh, you would just be so beautiful. I could just imagine together how wonderful that would be. What is that all about?
Yeah.
At the very beginning of a relationship, it's like, that barefoot and pregnant, that expression came from somewhere.
It certainly did.
it didn't fall out of a tree. That didn't. It's an expression. It's an expression because it's true, right?
True. Yeah. I mean, once you have a child together, you do have another really strong bond, right?
Yes.
And then you start getting a little more lax in, I don't want to say lax because it's never your fault if you're in an abusive relationship, but you're so busy you can't pay attention to all the little details, right?
Right.
You start to pick your battles. Like, I'm not going to express my opinion right now because I know he'll blow up and I'm not in the mood for it or I don't have time for it or whatever you're telling yourself,
Yeah. And sometimes they also want you to move far away from where you have your support network. So say you're newly together and he says, oh, let's move to Montana where my Uncle Pete lives. And, we're life far away from all these people who are meddling in our business. And it's, oh, let's go away. But it's, again, that's to remove you from your support network and get you isolated. So it may sound nice. It's not nice. So if you only had one of those things, it's just a coincidence. But if you begin to see a pattern that you have this and this and this and this and this, that's a concern.
Right. And why do you think, and if you even agree with this, I don't know if you do or not, but why do you think we tend to talk ourselves down from that? I remember getting to a point where I'm like, this is not right. But then I would kind of be either talk myself out of it, like maybe ignoring that internal voice that's saying, this is not quite right. But I would have justifications for it. I would have reasons for it. And then I would get immersed back in our daily routine. Do you think that happens sometimes?
I do think that happens. And I know for me, I had already had the one failed marriage. And I, my parents weren't particularly happy, but they stayed together till the end, right? So I kind of had this feeling of belief system that you made your bed, you lied in it, right? That's just the way it is. Lots of people are married and aren't particularly happy. You just, that was one belief system I had that kept me stuck. And another one was my faith, that I took very seriously, the vows I'd made before God. And of course, he was being a minister. He used my faith as another means to control me. And so he would say, you're not submitting to me enough. And that's what the problem is. So it would be like, you just have to pray. You have to forgive me. All right, so what? I lost my temper. I mean, what's the matter with you? Aren't you a good Christian? It would be like all this twisted thing. And, when you get in the middle of that, and I had my family. I had 3 kids by this time. I'm dealing with a full-time job. We were running a ministry, and we had a business, and and I'm running like a hamster on a wheel. It was really confusing to figure out what the truth was. It wasn't a simple day. He had lots of time to plan the next crazy thing, right?
Right.
I didn't have very much time. I was just on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. I really like that analogy, and I bet there's a lot of listeners, people in the world that would agree with that analogy. You do. You feel like you're just going around in circles, never making any progress, never being heard, never being valued, and it just wears you out.
Yes, it was exhausting. It was exhausting.
It is exhausting.
And then,
go ahead.
Then you're separated from your family and friends, right? So you have no one to talk to. Where normally I think, especially as women, we use each other as sounding boards, and we talk things through. And as we're talking, we figure it out. But when you don't have anyone to talk to, you're just locked in your own head, and they never stop with the brainwashing techniques, right? So that's coming at you all the time. So it's very hard to sift through it and
yes, and come up with an answer that doesn't support that. I think too, when I'm doing my talking, I talk a lot about changing the social and cultural norms that condone and perpetuate violence in relationships. And by that, I mean that really strict gender role identification. The man mows the yard, the woman cares for the kids, and there's no deviation from that.
Right.
Do you think that's a sign that people could be looking for as well?
Yes, I know in my marriage, we too had very, very strict gender roles, and he was also from Mexico, which was very, if we have misogynistic attitudes here, just imagine from there it's just a little bit more so. Mm-hmm. But my dad was almost 20 years older than my mother, and I was raised like that, so everything didn't seem abnormal to me,
Right.
My dad was Archie Bunker, he had a different name, but,
Okay.
So my mom was Edith, so that's the way I was raised, and it didn't seem that odd to me, all those very strict gender roles seemed normal. That's the way I was raised. Of course, I'm, almost 60 now, so
right.
That was the generation I came from.
Me too. And the other thing I was wondering about, because I get asked all the time, what are some red flags? What do we look for? And so this, to me, is a really important conversation, and I hope that the listeners are, taking this in, because another thing that I thought of when you said you wanted to talk about red flags was, and this is probably not true for everybody, but I call the kid's father the ex. So the ex had a really rough childhood and was verbally and emotionally abused, and maybe some neglect, some really extreme discipline. It was done in the name of discipline anyway. And he kind of, looking back, I say he kind of used that to manipulate me. And then afterwards, when you tell people that this was the kind of relationship you have, they'll say, "But he had such a rough childhood," as if that justifies all that.
I don't think there's any justification for abuse. Lots of people have rough childhoods and don't abuse anyone. So it's not an excuse, but I have heard other people say the same thing that you just said, that they use that maybe to justify to themselves. I don't know. And then they hold it over you. So just tolerate this because I had a rough childhood,
Yeah.
No. No. How about we all choose what we're doing and we're all responsible for what we do?
Yeah. And at what age do you let go of your childhood memories and make an adult and informed decision about how you want to behave?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing, too, is that people generally don't recognize control as a part of a violent relationship. But I think it's one of the most damaging aspects of a violent relationship. What is your opinion on that?
Yes, absolutely. I had never seen any where it happened to me. He, of course, I've already said that he controlled my relationships, but I didn't talk about how he controlled money. But he made me sign over my paychecks to him. And it happened very easily at first. He was at home and I was at work, so he said, just sign over the paycheck and I'll do the banking. I have the car and I can run the errands. Sure, why not? That's great. Yeah. I thought it was being helpful. And he said, I'll pick up the mail. I lived in a rural town with no mail delivery. I said, sure, here's the key. I had no idea that I wouldn't see the mail again for 10 years.
Yeah.
I had no idea that I would not have access to a debit card, a credit card, or any finances whatsoever for 10 years. But this is what began to happen. So if he controls the gas that's in the car, whether or not I have gas, I don't see the mail, I don't have a debit card, I don't have any cash. Anything I have, he takes from me. It's just you have no options. After a while, you have no options.
Right.
And it gets very, he watched the odometer. He controlled the telephone. Just so many things. How I wore my hair, if I got a haircut, all those things. It was amazing. I mean, you can't name something that he didn't control.
Yeah. Or at least try his hardest to control it. I think sometimes I did start resisting those control tactics, but it never ended well for me.
I tried once. I did because I was committed to the marriage. I said, all right, I'm going to break this financial control. So I thought, I'm going to get a job as a waitress because they give me tips and I'll have cash in my hand. I'm going to open a separate bank account and save some money. And for that, I need a post office box. So the first thing I did was I got a post office box. I didn't have that post office box 24 hours. Asked him, because we lived in a small town, oh, so I see your wife got a P.O. box. Are you changing all of your mail from this point to that point? Or
oh, no.
I'm confused, right? Because all they knew him as was the businessman. He was always in a suit, and so they had no idea what he was like at home.
No.
So he came straight home and he said, you got a post office box. Why'd you do that? You're going to turn over that post office box right now. So I thought, okay, so I had to
there went that plan.
Right? But I did get the waitress job, and he would follow me around the house. You have to quit that job. He would wake me up at night, keep me up. It was sleep deprivation, right? wake me up all night long. You have to quit that job. He'd follow me around. You have to quit that job. So I thought I had kept it for a while, and I looked at my pay stubs to see how long I had been able to stand up under his pressure. I only made it 4 weeks, and I had to quit the job. The pressure was unbelievable.
And it is a lot of pressure. There's all kinds of ways an abusive person can try to control you when you do have any sense of any independence, such as a job outside the home, or you want to go to school, to improve your education, or to get a skill or knowledge to get a job outside the home. But now, you and I talked before the show about your next steps. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your next steps, because I think this is a really important work that you're doing too, Maxine.
Well, I would like to help women to empower themselves. I'd like to work with women to, like I had no one to support me when I was co-parenting with this person. And I had to find a way, as crazy as it was, to create peace and harmony for my daughter. And so I would like to work with women to help them when they're co-parenting with a crazy ex. Sometimes we think, we couldn't get along with this person. We got a divorce. And now we think everything's going to be fair and everybody's going to focus on the needs of the child. Well, I think that's crazy expectation, isn't it? I mean, it's never going to happen. You couldn't agree with about anything before. Why on earth do you think now it's going to be okay and he's going to be reasonable? He's not going to be reasonable now either, right? No. So I learned the hard way strategies to increase the harmony and the peace that I had as I and I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to create a peaceful life for my daughter. She had a very good childhood, believe it or not. She graduated from high school. We were all able to show up at the high school graduation with zero drama. I'm looking forward to weddings and college graduations and I know we can do that because of these strategies that I put in place, because I was not going to be jerked around anymore, right? Mm-hmm. But I had to focus on the needs of or that she had harmony and peace so she could focus on being a little kid instead of having her mom and dad fighting and all this crazy nonsense going on. And so, I say, ditch the drama and move on, Mama. Be happy.
I love it. I love it.
And so that's why I want to work with people, to show them these strategies to increase your boundaries and create a healthier, happier environment in your home so that you can make it through and your kids can make it through and be happy instead of crazy drama with mom and dad.
Yeah. Well, if they used control and verbal and emotional tactics while you were married, chances are they may still attempt to use those once you separate.
Of course.
And so once you're separated and you start to get your sense of self and autonomy back, it's really hard to just accept those behaviors anymore.
Right.
And so, I think what you're doing is really wonderful. The ex really, he was so inconsistent with everything he did. He wouldn't show up for visitation on time. The one thing he did do was pay child support, but, I had 4 kids and a really terrible previous work history, so it was really hard for me to support the 5 of us. But he would always interrogate me on what I was using that child support money for. So that was just another way for him to terrorize me. What are your thoughts on helping people work through those types of scenarios?
That's the exact thing that I'm talking about, is the visitation. Why is he always late? Why is he late? It's because you can't make plans because you never know when he's going to show up, right?
Right.
The kids become a pawn, and that they can spy on you. So what'd you and mom do this week? Did your mom have any new friends? Anything the kids know is going to be information that he's going to pull out of them.
Right.
So then you have to even control the information that the kids have, because they don't have the level of sophistication to know what's happening.
Yeah.
And so...
And they would tell him because they wouldn't think it was a big deal.
Of course. And then whatever information he has is used as a weapon against you. He used to torment my daughter if she even mentioned anyone in my family, like if she mentioned her grandmother, or if she mentioned that we went to visit my sister. Then she was like berated, how, you're choosing them over me. You're choosing the devil's people and not God's people. All this crazy stuff. So I finally had to teach her. Now she was 10, 11 years old. I said, the only way you're going to have peace is when we go visit your grandmother, just don't mention it to Dad. You can't mention it because then he's going to yell at you and say ugly things to you. Mm-hmm. And so we had to create these two. We successfully did that. We created these two worlds where any of these people over here to him, because then she would suffer these horrible consequences. And that way she was able to have more peace. And, little things like that. I mean, it made a huge difference in the level of peace that she...
Yeah. I really liked what you said just a little bit earlier about helping people set boundaries. Let's talk about that, should we?
Yes, boundaries. Is he allowed to come into your home? If he's been violent, maybe you need a boundary where he cannot come into your home, because your home needs to be a safe haven for you and your kid. So make sure you do the visitation exchanges, maybe at the local McDonald's or something in a public place where he does not have to cross the threshold of your home. That creates a safer place for you.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a crazy situation.
I think boundaries
Public
are particularly hard, though, for survivors, because anytime I remember, still, it's been 20-some years since we've separated, but I still remember thinking, if I set a boundary, it's going to cost me. So it was really hard for me to, after being controlled and then getting away from it, I didn't want anything to do with trying to control anybody else either. So, but being a parent, you have to be able to set guidelines and boundaries to teach your kids. So I think there's a whole lot of confusing things going on in one's mind. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I know how hard it was for me. And then I could never say no to my ex, right? That was unthinkable. You couldn't say no to him.
No.
There was, that took a lot of hard work. That was very difficult, I have to say. When I first left, he even tried to control, there was a ballet recital, and he said that I had to bring my daughter to his house, where the costume was, right? I had to bring her to his house so she could get the costume on, and then he wanted to make sure that I sat with him at the recital, right? Because, I mean, he would, I could go on and on and on. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But it took a lot for me to be able to say, we'll go to the same recital, we will drive in separate cars, I will not sit with you.
Yeah.
Even that was a small thing, but that took a lot of courage. I could do that. And, it was battle after battle with myself more than with anybody else.
Yeah.
To be able to say, no, I don't have to sit with you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. It's to sit by myself, but go to the recital. And then we could not celebrate together because then he would say horrible things to me. It would turn into some crazy attack me thing. And so we had to do our celebrations of the events separately.
Yeah.
I tried it together once or twice, and he couldn't hold it together for more than 5 minutes. And then that would ruin my daughter's event.
Yes.
So when you focus on your daughter, or about your child, then it becomes obvious we can't celebrate together because the other person can't be nice for that long. So then you have separate celebrations. Then the child has a happy day. That's what it's all about.
It is. It is. Well, I think what you're offering to people who have the same, this co-parenting concern will be invaluable because, like you said, they don't really have anybody to talk to about that. Because if they go to their side of the family and ask for support, they'll be shut him out. Just it could be that way. And then, your friends are like tired of hearing you talk about it, maybe.
Yes, they're burnt out.
They get burnt out. So it's really important for them to know they have somebody they could at least talk to about that. Here's what I'm thinking would handle it. And then you can say, so yeah, great. Here's some pros and cons, right?
And to be able to recognize manipulation for what.
Yeah, the traps that might be being set for you.
And when it's you, and it's like they take a stick and they jab you with this stick, and they want to see you jump. Well, if you realize that's what they're doing, then you don't jump, right? Or you avoid the stick or something. Or they throw that. You don't put the hook in your mouth. Let it fall on the floor.
Yeah.
It's like the little boy who's running around in the classroom tickling the girl. They want to tickle the little girl, keeps the squeals, right? Because that's what makes it fun. But if they tickle somebody and they're not ticklish, they're not going to tickle you anymore because it's no fun. They want to hear you squeal. So let the hook fall on the floor. Don't put it in your mouth. So
I think that's so true.
Yeah, and you need help with that because when you're used to being controlled, you may not realize that that's a manipulation tactic. And you need somebody outside whose their heart's not all twisted up in it, who can see it clearly for what it is.
And can give you some honest feedback and maybe even support you in a decision you're making. Because I think that's really hard, too, when you've been in an abusive relationship. You almost don't know how to make decisions because everything you decided within that relationship was wrong. So now that you have that person there even to do that, but you still hear that voice and you still question every decision you make.
Absolutely.
Fabulous conversation. I thank you so much for joining my radio show, Deborah Says, tonight. And really appreciate your time. How can the listeners get in touch with you if they would like to learn more about your upcoming work and your books and things like that?
My email address. It's Maxine Brown, and Brown has an E on the end. If you don't add the E, you won't find me.
Right.
So Maxine Brown at DV, like domestic violence, dash recovery.com. And everything I have is under the name Maxine Brown. So I have a YouTube channel, Maxine Brown. I'm on Twitter at Maxine Brown. I'm on Facebook, Maxine Brown. So you can find me just about anywhere. And my my website is maxinebrown.com. So you can find me.
That's perfect. That makes it easy.
Yeah, it's just one size fits all. But if you don't
just remember the E at the end of Brown.
That's right. Maxine Brown likes brownies.
Brownie. Yeah. That's great. Well, I look forward to our upcoming book that's coming out in March, and I'm sure I will see you in social media. It's pretty hard for us to see each other face to face since you're in the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast, but I still feel really connected to you because of all the things that you've just said and all the things we've done together. So I want to thank you so much for joining the conversation tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. And we can always Skype, you know.
We can.
Skype's a wonderful thing.
Provided our technology holds out for us. That's right. So for my readers, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. And I wanted to let you know that I had, in 1 week's time, I've had some pretty drastic changes go on in my life. Last Wednesday, I quit my day job, if you would want to call it that. I left a job with a steady paycheck and medical insurances and all of those kind of routine and things that make it easy. And I am making it work for me now. I'm at a stage in my life. My next birthday, I will turn 60, and I decided to take the risk. Feel the fear and do it anyway is what I decided. So I'm going to be working as a consultant, self-empowerment strategies, and I also recently was appointed Washington State Director for Unite Women. This is a fabulous organization of women and men across the United States, and we are doing a campaign. January was Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and on a Saturday, February 15th, from 2 to 4 p.m., we will have a panel, and I'm going to be on the panel. And the conversation is a global conversation on human and sex trafficking. And I'd really love to invite you to join in on that. It will be on free internet radio, so you can get it wherever you're at. And also to invite you to participate in their campaign, where you can submit a statement that you've made taking a stand against sex trafficking. You can do this anonymously. You can use your initials. You can use a pen name. However you want to do it. You can even submit your picture. But you can submit this statement to awareness@unitewomen.org to be included in a series they are developing of posters and images to use on public social media. So you will be able to find that information on my website, which is DeborahKAdamsSES.com. You'll be able to find it on my Facebook page and my self-empowerment strategies page. All those places. I'm on social media in just about every possible way. I'm on Pinterest. I have a Tumblr. I have an Instagram. I have Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. And so if you type in the name Deborah K. Adams, M.A., which stands for my graduate degree, you will probably find me and you can follow me. And I would love to hear from you. Please don't hesitate to share your thoughts and concerns. And I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday here on Bold Radio Station. And it's 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will look forward to a fabulous week and report to you next Tuesday. Thank you and good night.
Thank you for listening. You can reach Deborah at Deborah K. Adams, MA, @gmail.com, or go to her website, www.sissies.net, www.deborahkadamssays.com, www.deborahkadamsthemissingpiece.com. See you next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Deborah says, and remember, you are empowered.